it's complicated, and I think there's reasons why we overdo it or have, and we're human. We don't want to see other people suffering, And that's the complicated thing about boundaries.
Yeah.
It's like, that's why so many of us don't, because we don't want to see people suffering,
right.
And that really pulls at some of our deepest needs to help each other.
If you have followed the rules but feel unsatisfied with where that's gotten you, this podcast is for you.
We'll help you learn how to reach your goals through creativity, intuition, and flow.
Welcome to the Flow into Authenticity podcast.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Hello.
Woohoo. Welcome back to Flow into Authenticity.
I just want everybody to know that Allison is holding back her enthusiastic hi from the beginning.
It's so hard. I really just want to blow your eardrums out every time we start an episode.
If you've been listening to us, Allison loves to start off with enthusiasm, with excitement.
Yes, yeah. I'm always reminded of a scene from the movie Best in Show. Have you both seen Best in Show?
Oh, I love that movie.
Oh my God.
Really, Jen? We need to get together and watch that movie.
I will admit, movies are a huge blind spot for me.
Oh no. Well,
let us introduce you.
There's a scene where one of the dogs, so it's about dog shows, and one of the big winners of the previous dog shows was going on a morning show. And just before they start filming, the two co-hosts look at each other and they go, "Energy."
Is that the couple? The couple?
No, it's the hosts. The hosts of the morning show. But I think about that all the time.
Oh, Energy. Yeah, so. Wait. You said that before on the podcast, haven't you? Okay.
Have I? Well, it's just I'm trying to hammer it into Jen's head that she needs to watch Best in Show.
Okay. I thought you were going to say hammer it into my head that I need to bring the energy.
Oh no.
No, Allison's got the energy.
No, it's actually a bit of a running joke in my household. I'll just say I'm a bit more of a morning person than my husband is. And so I'll sometimes gently taunt him by kind of jumping up and down in front of him saying, "Energy, energy, energy," while he's still in wake-up mode.
Oh, no. See, this is so interesting. Okay, we're going to talk about boundaries. And this is really interesting because we're all different, right? And I'm like I haven't been tested, but I think I have that genetic thing where you hear sounds, like you're sensitive to sounds, and you actually it can be painful to hear like loud sounds. Huh. And so I'm very sensitive. So we have this ongoing joke. That's why I'm bringing this up, because Allison, says hello with energy. And so this, right? Yes. So like we're all different. And
it's a bit much.
No, I don't want to cramp your style, but I also am sensitive. So it's really interesting that we're going to talk about boundaries, and to note that we all are different, and we all need different things, right? Mm-hmm. And we all bring different things to the table, which
Jen needs to jump up and down, shouting energy, and Rob needs to set a boundary.
Yeah, and Rob needs to. My dad used to do that to me in the morning. I was the only person. Now I'm more of a morning person, but back then, everybody in my family was a morning person except me. And he would come into my room, sometimes he would drag the sheets off and he would play this song. I think it was from one of our tapes that we used to listen to, and it was like, good morning, good morning, good morning, it's time to rise and shine, good morning, good morning, good morning, hope you're feeling fine. See, this might even trigger somebody who has but it was like so horrible for me because like, I'm so sensitive, and like they made me feel so bad for like sleeping in. Yeah.
Okay. I would hereby like to offer a public apology to my husband.
Oh my God.
I don't know how we got started on this whole thing.
It's really good though. So we're talking about boundaries today because it seems to be related to a lot of other things that we're thinking about right now. And it's kind of at that intersection point of the Venn diagram. And I think all of us probably have some boundaries that we're pretty good at setting and keeping to, and some boundaries that we're, not so good at setting and holding our guns to hold those boundaries firm. So we were going to talk today about why have boundaries? How are they useful to us? Why is it hard to set them? And why it could be important to make an intention to have a boundary. So why don't we just get into this? So boundaries, what does it make you cringe when I say that word, or are you like, yes, I love boundaries?
I love me some boundaries. Oh, as a coach, man, as a coach and as like a recovering people pleaser, recovering empath. Oh God, I love boundaries. I think you can love boundaries too much, which we might talk about. And
yes.
go to the other extreme where you're kind of isolating yourself and keeping yourself out from other people. But man, I love talking about this.
Maybe that's a good thing to figure out, is where people are on the spectrum of boundaries, because we probably, when we talk about like we need more boundaries, when we talk about things like that, we probably have someone in mind who lets people stomp all over their boundaries and their time and everything. But you're right that there might be people listening who have too many walls up,
too many boundaries,
and it makes more work for everyone around them. And it, like you said, it makes it harder for them to make connections with people. So
definitely have. I know some. I am that way myself, and I know some. Some of the, and sometimes it comes from actually not having too many boundaries and going to the extreme, which you have to do for a while. But we could talk about that later. Why do we need boundaries?
Yeah, Jen, why do you need boundaries?
I need boundaries because if I didn't, I would pretty much give all of my time to work and all of my time to my students and all of my time to the things outside myself.
Aha. So that brings up a couple questions. First of all, why is it that you are oriented to go to that extreme? And have you let yourself go to that extreme before? And what were the consequences?
Ooh, have I let myself go to the extreme? Gosh, I don't know that I've ever gone out to really the outer edge of extreme, but there certainly have been times in my career where I've felt out of balance, and too much of my time, or more than I would want, is being given over to say to coaching students or to dealing with administrative tasks that I don't feel are necessarily central to my work or to my vision of what I want to accomplish.
So setting a boundary for you has to do with bringing balance to, things that you feel you need to do and things that you feel you want to do and value. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that is a very good summary of it.
Yeah. That sounds hard.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
about how about you, Esther? So you said you're really good at setting boundaries. Tell us about
Well,
that.
yeah, I think now, well, so I grew up in a religion that was, well, I was very sensitive, and sort of like porous. Like I didn't, I wasn't able for reasons, which I won't go into. That question that you initially asked, Jen, I was like, oh God, are we starting to like therapy, be the therapy for each other? For each other. But anyway, I won't go into all of my childhood family details, but I wasn't able to develop a strong sense of self. And also mixed with the fact that I grew up in a like a dogmatic religion with people around me who demanded attention.
Mm.
So that I wasn't able to develop boundaries for myself. So, like when we're kids, it's super important that we um, are able to like test our sense of self, right? Like our what I call your core creative essence. So, like, who am I? What can I get away with? Like, how do I express my inner power, my inner self, and so a lot of us that was kind of like squelched, right? So we had to kind of just follow what other people told us to do, right? In every way, like, you know, what are you going to eat or what are you going to wear or like what do you
Mm.
say, what do you not say, and all these things, right? So I really had no like not a good sense of self. And so over the years, and I go through this with the flow method that we've talked about in this podcast and with my clients, is that when we start to really develop, like, what do I want and what do I need? How do I want to feel? And who really am I at my core? Like, what are my values? Once I started going through that myself and really discovering, like, who the heck am I? What do I want? Then boundaries are something that becomes a necessity, right? For
Mm.
you to maintain, like Jen, like you were saying, I need boundaries so that I can do the things that I want, and
Mhm.
grow. We always need to grow, like we've talked about so much in this podcast, grow ourself, our own essence, listen to our own intuition, right? So for me, it was like, as I was listening to my intuition gave me these little nudges that told me, like, what are the boundaries that I need? And I think we're going to share some examples, right? So I won't go into those, but yeah, does that make sense? And since I've had those boundaries, whether it's like creating more time for myself to be alone with myself, or boundaries with other people, I have cultivated more of this who I am, getting to know myself and what I want and what I need. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I appreciated that Jen talked about that part of it. Like, this is what I would do, and these are the things that I need, and it would take me away from that. So that's the essence of what we're talking about today. The reason to have boundaries is so you actually create time and space for you to focus on things that you want to do, things that align with your values, and don't find, it's kind of a slippery slope into, doing things to please other people or to lighten other people's loads. And that's very important. But if 100% of your time is helping other people lighten their loads, you are going to destroy yourself. And so it's that old example, the analogy from flying on a plane, be sure to put your mask on before you put someone else's mask on. You have to have that boundary. Like, I need to take care of myself a little bit first so that I can give my gifts to the world, so that I can help other people. And I think those of us who are oriented around compassion and helping other people, it's harder to set that boundary and to realize that part of helping other people is taking care of yourself.
Yeah, and I love that. What's beautiful about that is it really shows whether it's like your kids or other friends or parents. It really actually is a benefit to them, even though it doesn't feel like it. And it's so uncomfortable at first, but it actually is a way to show people, oh, this is how you set boundaries. This is how you, especially with kids, it's like, this is how you set boundaries for yourself, like this is how you, um, like make space for yourself and for getting to know yourself instead of just becoming porous and letting everybody dictate everything for you. It
Right.
really is like a benefit for other people too.
I'm curious if Jen has an example of that where she's set a boundary. Jen, have you set a boundary and done it intentionally to be a model for others, or unintentionally and found that someone really appreciated that you were modeling that?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I have done intentionally. So as I alluded to earlier, one of my joys at work is being available to my college students, right? Helping them learn, helping them navigate challenges as they arise. But I cannot be instantly responsive to every email, to every thing that they throw at me. So I have been very deliberate about doing things like um, setting out of office messages when I'm going to be away from my desk, letting people know, okay, this is my time away. I will not be checking my messages, and I will respond to you when I am back. But in the meantime, I've got my own thing to do, whether that thing is uh, another professional project or if it is time away to be with my family or to be on vacation. So that's a very small way that I feel like I have started to model for my students for whom professional formation and learning to be a functioning adult is some of what happens in college. And so I think it's a really valuable behavior to model for them
Absolutely.
that we are whole people, and we are not glued to our computers 24/7. I
Oh,
try not to be anyway.
I love that. I love that modeling. I look for that it's I don't know if I look for it consciously, but I look for it in people. I
Mm.
notice it in people and in clients when they start, like if they will only either answer, the people that have the notes on their email, I only answer my email blah 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 times. I think it's
Mhm.
such a sign of maturity. Because something that we haven't mentioned is like emotional capacity. Not only do we set boundaries for things that we want to do, but we set boundaries because some of us don't have the emotional capacity. We all have different emotional capacities, right? And
Mhm.
what I mean is, like, I might be able to like interact with people all day long, and then my husband might not, can only take 2 hours of it or whatever. But like, yeah, modeling that for people, and I think seeing in other people, it's just such like a sign to me that of like that kind of emotional maturity, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
That's huge. I saw during the pandemic, someone I respect had on his emails, I'm sending this email when it's convenient for me. Please do not feel you have to reply immediately if it's outside of your normal work hours.
Oh, I love
And I
that.
was so taken with that I started adding it to my email signature. And so he
Oh,
was modeling for me, like, look,
yeah.
I'm sending this at 3 a.m. on a Saturday, but I don't take that as a sign that I expect you to be on your email at an inappropriate time for you.
That
Yeah.
I
And
have started to see that proliferate
oh, I
on
love
email
it.
signatures, a
I love
I
version of
love
it.
that.
it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's funny because it can be triggering. If you are a person that doesn't have any boundaries, people with boundaries are triggering for you.
Hmm.
So back when I used to respond, I used to work for clients and I would call them design emergencies because they would email me and be like, I need this, or sometimes even text me and be like, I need this like right away. And I'll tell you the whole story, but once I started setting boundaries, I mean, people would get I don't know if people get triggered, but I used to get triggered when people wouldn't respond to me right away. And now I'm kind of like, "Oh, good job." Like they're
But
not responding to me right away. Good job.
would you get
Um
triggered even if they set that expectation? Even if they said, like, I'm not going to be responding during these days, would you still get angry or annoyed?
I don't know. I don't know. I just
Bec-
know, like, back when I didn't have those boundaries, when I would respond to people all like
Mhm.
instantly, it really got my goat when, like, when people took their time or they didn't respond to me on time, like in my amount of, the way that I would. So it's really fascinating. And that could go for any boundary. That's why when you start to set boundaries, people will get mad because they're
Mhm.
used to you responding or in a certain way. So that's part of the thing with setting boundaries is it feels so uncomfortable and
Mhm.
so unintuitive, at first. you know
However, if you set the expectation at the same
yeah, I
time that you
love
set the
that.
boundary, I think it does help on the other side of it
Yeah,
to receive the boundary. Like,
can you tell
oh,
us a little
this,
bit about that?
oh, me?
Yeah, like set us up.
Yeah. So, there's something I was just writing about in our book about someone turning me down when I asked them to be on a committee. Or yeah, I think I maybe I asked them to be on my editorial board for Focus, and they were like, it sounds really interesting, but it's not really aligned with where I want to put my energy right now. So I appreciate being asked, but this is why I can't say yes. And hearing that instead of just like having someone ghost me or just say, no, sorry, made a big mental difference in my head. I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense to me why they're saying no. And I have no ill will towards that person.
I love that example because it goes hand in hand with intention setting.
Mm,
So I found that, like, when I have this thing, I think probably all of us do, where we kind of fall in love with ideas and like we want to collaborate with people. We love doing things, exciting things. But when and so like when people would ask me things, I'd kind of be like wish wash. Yeah, yeah, I want to do that. But then later on, my capacity was overwhelmed, right?
yes,
So when
yes.
we set our intentions and we have like kind of clear intentions of what we want to do, it helps us like whoever you asked,
Hmm.
they kind of thought about it and thought about their intentions, what they wanted, and
Hmm.
decided that it wasn't a good fit, right? So we could help other people. That's another way we could help other people by, and I think that's how you wrote about it in the book was the context
Modeling
of,
that behavior.
yeah,
Yeah, modeling
yeah,
that behavior.
yeah.
Not only does it make other people not triggered by your boundary, but it teaches them something. Like you
Mm-hmm.
saying no can be like a
Yeah.
useful lesson for someone else.
And farther, you're not going to bail halfway through the project because
Mm-hmm.
you're overwhelmed and you don't have the
Mm.
capacity. So, recognizing your capacity, recognizing your intention, and, once we're in the habit of setting boundaries, we'll kind of do that automatically, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can kind
Mm-hmm.
of like go, like, okay, do I have the capacity for this? And we get it, it gets easier, I think, the more that we do it.
Yeah.
There is a very useful filter that I like to apply when somebody asks me to give a presentation, for example, or join a committee. And that is, if this were to appear on my calendar tomorrow, would I be okay with it?
Ooh. Ooh.
Because you
Wow.
can, if somebody asks
Allison.
you to give a presentation and it's 2 months away, future
Yeah.
you future you can do anything, right? That idea
Yeah.
of future
Yeah.
you has limitless capacity, but
Mm,
real you, tomorrow you, has to have boundaries, just has a limit,
Mm-hmm.
right? The container can
Mm-hmm.
only hold so much. So,
Mm.
in addition to thinking about, does this request align with my values and my priorities? Just thinking very, very strategically about, okay, and how does it fit into my container of time? And
mhm.
do
Yeah.
do I want to make space for it?
Yeah, and it's not just time, it's emotional energy. Like maybe we
Mm-hmm.
can work
Right.
8 hours a day, but maybe only 2 or 3 of those hours can be really focused work. And if we're saying yes to
Right.
something that's going to take an hour of focused work a day, maybe an hour out of 8 hours doesn't seem so bad, but an hour out of that 3 hours that you have where you're really focused, that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So that's part of the equation for me. And you talked about speaking engagements. Whenever I have a new talk to prepare, I know it's going to be like 2 months of anxiety leading up to it. So I have to factor that in. It's not just that
Yeah.
day or the couple of days I'm traveling. It's also all the anxiety and nausea that
Yeah.
comes before it. And if I'm willing to accept that, then I accept it. But it's very easy to not take that stuff into account in your calculus
Right.
of
Right.
what to say yes to.
So we've talked a lot about kind of like career stuff. What about like personal boundaries, like boundaries with people
Mm.
or kids? People are kids. Kids are people. Partners,
They're
kids,
small people.
relationships, friendships,
Mm. Uh,
parents.
Yeah.
I I'll just use as a launching point for this conversation. To me, the work of the writer Gretchen Ruben is salient. So she has a framework called the Four Tendencies, and it divides people up essentially into four quadrants based on how they respond to inner expectations and how they respond to outer expectations. And so, if you are a person who has difficulty maintaining your inner expectations, but readily responds to outer expectations, that is, the things that other people ask of you or expect of you, you are what is called an obliger in Gretchen Rubin's framework. And so, I will tell you, I am very much an obliger. And so,
Mm,
when other people have expectations of me, or I think they expect certain things from me, it makes it challenging for me to say no. And so as a result, my boundary setting with people, um, you know, it's a work in progress. We'll say
mm,
that.
mm-hmm. That's really interesting. I'm totally in that category. And the non-work related boundary that I'm struggling with is so I go to this camp of asylum seekers 2 or 3 times a week. And I've kind of tried to cut myself off at various points. But then I'll say, okay, this is the last time I'm going to go deliver some donations. And then I'll see men shivering out in 30-degree weather with no coats. And I'll just be like, oh my God, I can't stop helping these people. I need to put out another call for coats, or I need to like sneakily buy a coat without anyone knowing that I'm spending more of my own money on this problem when I said that I was going to not spend any more money. Um, so I'm really like going over any boundaries that I had wanted to set with spending money and spending time. But I find it so hard to set a boundary around this issue because when I talk to people, especially if they get my number, they say, "Oh, okay, let me have your number." And then they start asking me for things like, "Oh, can I have a electric stove? Can you get me this lotion? Oh, my son needs some shoes." I want to do all those things. And the more that I go, the more people I'm connected with who are asking me for things. And it's just that's one of my biggest struggles right now is setting a boundary around that.
Hmm. That's so hard. It's so hard when we see people in need, and I think this is why people who are doing like social work or doing advocacy work, like it's a high rate of burnout, because it's so like, where do you hold that boundary? And like, if people are just in need, that's so hard.
Yeah, and nurses and doctors and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I don't
And
I don't have
educators.
an educators.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no kidding.
I mean, I don't have an answer to that. All I know is that like looking inside of ourselves at again, like capacity, like what do
Mhm.
you like going coming back to yourself and asking yourself what you need and
Mm.
you know, um yeah,
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because I could have an idea that I want to buy someone a coat. Let's use that example. I'm always on my phone, and now that I've been buying cheap coats for so long for the migrants, I'm constantly bombarded with ads for
oh
like,
gosh,
"Oh, this
yeah.
coat's only $25." I'm like, "Well,
Yeah.
shoot, I can spend another
Yeah.
$25."
Yeah.
Um, so that makes it hard because every moment of the day I have to make a conscious decision to not help someone. That's hard.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, or you could change your perspective
Yeah.
and, you know, how
Well,
are you helping, like you said, putting on the mask on the plane if you can, or
yeah.
like sometimes when we create boundaries, we have to open up to people helping us. I mean, I know a lot of people are helping you, but sometimes we have to let go of something and give it to somebody else, and
Yes.
open up to other people having the responsibility and not just us. So
That's
I
the thing
think,
is like, why do I feel like I'm
right,
responsible for
right.
this person being cold? Actually, it's not my responsibility to help them.
Well, yeah. I mean, or it's all of our responsibilities.
Right. Right.
It's not just yours. And I
Right.
think like with boundaries, I think, you know, there's something that gets triggered in us, whatever it is in our childhood or whatever that needs to, whatever it is, like could be like a million things. Like for me, my parents had no boundaries. So they just let all the like unhoused people stay in our house and like all the like just everybody just come on, like everybody. My dad was a pastor, so like he just had no boundaries. And so that has made me a little bit more like,
Protective.
well, protective. I mean, I am very much like wanting to help and help when I can.
Mm.
But I always am like with this lens of like, okay, like I have a boundary like this. I'm very like, and I think to an extreme sometimes where I maybe don't want to help all the time, but yeah. So I think yeah, it's complicated, and I think
Yeah.
there's reasons why we overdo it or have, and we're human. We don't want to see other people suffering.
Mhm.
And that's the complicated thing about boundaries.
Yeah.
It's like that's why so many of us don't, because we don't want to see people suffering,
Right.
and that really pulls at some of our deepest needs to help each other. And yeah.
I'm so grateful for my husband. If I were still single and I was still in my townhouse by myself, it would be full of migrants.
Oh God.
I just know it. But James is like, no, nobody is ever moving
Oh,
into.
good. That's really good. No, because as a kid who grew up
Yeah.
with that, it's not, I mean, that was my perspective. It could have been some other kid could have been like, "This is great. We've got all these people that are coming in our house." But me, it was like it didn't affect me well. So, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, oof, that's a hard one.
it is
So,
hard. Yep.
Allison, kudos to your fella for having the
I
boundary for you
know.
in this case.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he does too. He has a lot of really healthy, good boundaries. And I think that's like a cool dynamic in our relationship. He's on the other end of the boundary spectrum. So we're kind of at opposite ends of the boundary spectrum, and so we kind of help each other. I help him
Yeah.
push his boundaries a little bit. He helps me have more of them.
That's great.
Yeah.
How
How about
about Jen? What about personal boundaries
Mm.
besides Rob needing a boundary with morning, your morning excitement?
So, I have a hard time making time for play and abiding by it. So, one thing that I
Ooh.
have done recently is I have signed up for a couple of craft and art workshops. So, I now have dedicated time on my calendar set aside to play. And this is
Wow.
time that, yeah, now I know I won't be working, I can't be working. And I'm hopeful that those workshops will be a catalyst then to continue on creative projects
Oh,
that
that's awesome.
I'll be committed to holding that boundary of carving space and time for.
Oh,
Mm,
yeah, that's awesome. We've done a podcast before about making time and space for creativity, right? Or for
yeah.
whatever play. That's awesome.
How cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
sometimes that's
yeah.
helpful if you want to carve out time for something to allocate it. Um, it's harder to say, oh, I just need 2 more hours a week of me time. But if you find something to put in that spot, it gives you kind of an excuse like, oh, no, I can't do that. I've committed to doing this workshop.
Yeah, and it's a good way to kind of train yourself. Like you said, like if I'm going to be wanting to do this more often, it's such a good way to start to train yourself. Okay, I've got a couple hours. Then when the workshop's over, I can just keep that time. I think I always tell clients it's like making that time on your calendar, like putting it on your calendar and setting that boundary. Like, once we kind of go through, like, what are your goals and stuff? What do you need to reach those goals?
Mm.
Creating that time, saying, like, no, I'm not gonna, wash the dishes. I'm not gonna make dinner. Like, there was one time in my life where I just decided I wasn't gonna make dinner anymore. It was crazy. I was like, I need this time. Like, I need more work, like work creative time. I'm not making dinner. I mean, luckily we lived like really close to a place where we could walk down and get like healthy food for dinner. And so we did that all the time, and then it became like it actually worked out really nicely for our time together as well. But it's like how do you create that space on the calendar?
That's a great
Um,
example of letting go of assumptions.
yes, yes, yeah.
Jen's pointing at me like, yes, that's what I was gonna say.
It is.
I think I've used that example before in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because you can assume like, oh, that was my assumption passed to me from my mother, who was always like, okay, I have to make dinner and I have to make a healthy dinner, blah. And so my husband like literally does not care what he eats. Like he could be eating cardboard every day. Like he doesn't give a crap. Like he doesn't. So that my assumption was totally false, you know? And so, yeah, that's what you mean, right? By the assumption.
Totally. And a lot
Yeah.
of us, I think, have assumptions that we can't have boundaries around certain things because maybe it feels selfish. Maybe like having that boundary isn't a part of your job description, or, having that boundary makes you a bad parent, or, there are
Right.
a lot of reasons we tell ourselves that we can't have a certain boundary. But yeah.
Yeah. So the example I like to give in my work is that when I was sort of transitioning to more of like the work that I wanted to do and the life I wanted to live, is that I would always see these. So going back to role models for this, right? Or expanders, which we just did an episode about, but I would always see these artists who would like wake up and like paint or like read and draw in their sketchbook and like have coffee. And I was so jealous. I was always like, oh, I'm so jealous. Like I can't do that because I had clients like on the East Coast. And so I would just always like get up and get on the computer right at 8 a.m., and start working. I also I think we talked about this, like responding to them right away. I was like working weekends, all these things that were just exhausting me. And so I decided that I was going to take like, I think 2 hours for myself in the morning, whether it be like painting or writing or whatever. And I set that boundary and then I started setting other boundaries. Like, I'm not going to work on weekends and I'm not going to respond to you right away. And so slowly, like things began to shift, and it just gives you more energy.
Were there any negative consequences of you doing that? I'm curious.
I mean, probably there were a couple jobs where they're like, oh, we'll just find somebody else. But I got to the point where I didn't care,
Yes, that's
which is
awesome.
really hard. It's really hard. But yeah, and then, eventually you transition to where I'm finding clients that I enjoy more, doing the work that I enjoy more and making those changes. But it starts with like small things, right?
That reminds me of something I was thinking about earlier, which is when someone else has a really good boundary, sometimes I think that they seem important. Like,
Ooh.
they must be really important to have this boundary. Like they must be so fancy that they don't have time for my little ask. And so in a way, it's a way of giving yourself some extra clout, like in making yourself seem more important.
I think when you value yourself, and you value your time, it's the same if you're going into like a job interview, right? And you're like, I know myself. This is who I am. This is what I'm good at. They're going to be like, whoa, even if they don't hire you, they're going to be like, oh, damn, that person is, like that person is pretty, what did you say? They're important. They're important. They know themselves, right? Yeah. And that's such a good, I love that. That's such a good kind of maybe ending point for this.
Yeah.
Like when we know our value, that's why it goes hand in hand when I work with clients. And like, as you know, Allison, we're writing the book and you've been writing about this of like that first step of like getting to know who you are, getting to know your value as well as your values. Boundary setting, it's such a baller move. Like it is. Yes. It's like, I know myself. Right?
Yeah,
like
I know what I'm worth.
Yes. Yeah, taking back the autonomy and standing. It's hard, but you could do it little baby steps at a time.
And if you have a strong sense of self-worth, other people are going to respect you more. Yeah, they're going to feel that and say, oh, This is someone to be
important.
respected. Yeah.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yes. It's
So,
contagious.
Esther, have you just given us the nugget of a 4%?
Ooh,
I
have I?
think you might have.
Okay,
What
what
I
is it?
heard, and everybody out there in listener land, perhaps you heard as well, is that we should know our value, we should know ourselves, and use that examination to identify what's an area in your life where you might benefit from a little bit of boundary adjustment.
Yeah.
And I intentionally use the word boundary adjustment because, as we acknowledged, it goes both ways, right? You may need to establish a boundary, or you may need to think about a boundary that is too rigid, that is not serving you well.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, keeping others out, or,
Yep.
keeping you from vulnerability.
Yes.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that adjustment idea. Oh, thanks, Jen.
Cool.
Thanks, you guys. This was great.
Yeah. I always love talking to you ladies.
You're
I
the
know.
best.
Oh,
Aw.
you're the best.
Someday we need to do this in person and
Yeah.
and watch that movie.
Yeah, Best in Show.
Best in Show. Yeah.
Yeah. It was hard to schedule Jen for this recording, and it made me feel like Jen is so important.
So important.
I'm so impressed.
That's right.
I love
Although
that.
I
I
will
love that.
admit I did bend a little bit of a boundary to make this happen. Very well worth it.
Oh, well, thank
Aw.
you. Thank you
Yeah.
guys. And thanks
thanks
everybody
for
out there.
listening. Yeah.
If you like the show, please leave a comment or a listener review. We would really, really appreciate. We love you all. Bye.
Love you.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Flow into Authenticity podcast with your hosts, Esther Loopstra, Jen Sorensen, and me, Allison Henrich. Our original theme music is by James Wetzel, and James Wetzel also does sound editing. If you like what you've heard today, we hope that you will subscribe, like, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app.